Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of A Piece of Ash. This is my monthly show. It's a bit late, it's about 2 weeks late this time around, where I answer questions, get your guys sort of like want to know stuff, and go through the list on SurveyMonkey and answer what you've asked. It's usually about wargaming, the co-op, and what's going on sort of in the world of the tabletop market, and we kind of stick to that stuff. So what I'm going to do right now is go through your list of responses to the SurveyMonkey questionnaire, and if you want to get in a question for the December episode, you can click the link below in the video description, and that will take you through and let you answer your question. I do answer them as they come in. And what that means is that the faster you get one in, the more likely I am to answer it sort of like right away. So get your answer in quick, and hopefully if I don't answer it this time, I will answer it next time, and you can have your piece of ash. So what I'm gonna do, what I usually do, is work on some toys while we talk. So today, I will be building a War Core from Corvus Belli, 2 Fusiliers. That's the new Fusilier Hacker and Missile Launcher, and then a pair of Squallows and a CSU for Infinity. These are all models for my Neoterra army that I need to get built and painted this week for next weekend. So 2 Squallows, a CSU, and a pair of Fusiliers. Technically I need 2 CSUs, but I think I'm going to use one of my HVT models, probably the O12 agent as the second one, because there's only really one sculpt for the CSU right now, so I'm just going to use him as the second one, I think, and that will be that. So yeah, so let's get started and see what you guys have asked. All right, first question, and I'm loading here, is by Unpure. He asks, so GW have said that on 20% of their customers, that only, I think he means to say, 20% of their customers play with models that they buy. What's your view on that? I would say that that's probably not super far off. You have to understand that like there are people who buy miniatures, and I think what's really hard is for people to see outside of sort of their part of the Venn diagram. And if you guys know what I'm talking about when I say Venn diagram, I mean there's Venn diagram is a way of showing what things have in common and what things are outliers, and really how much of certain groups have things in common. So like for instance, I'm going to give you an example. If you go to any major 40K forum, let's say, or fantasy forum, you're going to have a couple of areas that have the most posts. One of them will always be the tactics and army list writing section. So wherever people go to talk about, you know, what the best army list is or what the best blah thing is, that's usually one of the places that you will have a huge amount of traffic on a forum. The second place will be the painting and modeling section. And what's funny is, I doubt that the admins for these huge forums really do a lot of like demographic work. They might actually, because some of these are big businesses now. They run advertising, of course, and so getting their forum traffic means more banner advertising, means more click-through, means more they make more money. It is how many users, unique users, uniquely use each forum. And I would hazard a guess that those 2 forums being very popular, that and like the news and rumors and general discussions forum probably are the biggest one. Is that there are people who pretty much only go to those forums or those sections on a big forum. There's guys who just love building and painting models. There's guys who love theorizing about what the best abilities of models are in the game. And when you talk about a Venn diagram, is how many people are in common with both of those groups, right? So how much of the circle overlaps? And what you're probably going to see is that not a huge proportion of those people overlap, and that one side might actually outnumber the other. People who are more concerned with, like, if you add up basically the unique users in each forum, people who like the painting and modeling section the best, people who like the army list and tactics writing section the best, people who like the general discussion, news and rumors section the best, the fiction and background one, all that stuff, you're probably going to get a bunch of pools of unique users, and let's say that only 20% of them maybe like the army list, tactics, and battle report section. Well, what do you extrapolate from that? I think that would be interesting in market research. I think if you guys, the public, were going to demand some like, well, let's see if this is true or not, you should write a bunch of letters to all the major forum users and ask them to try and track that demographic. What's the highest user frequented, like unique, what's basically the unique user count, or like the people who prefer having the highest percentage of their posts, let's say 51% or more of their posts are in a certain forum, right? And what's the most trafficked forums with like unique views. If they can pull that, like if their software can actually pull that analytic, I bet it'd be fairly revealing, because I don't necessarily know where that number is being pulled from, the Games Workshop's pulling, but from just my observance of how people use the internet to do their hobby, I would say that number is probably not far off. And I think the hardest part is when you sit in one group, being able to identify that there even are that many people in the other group, because you just don't go there. Like, you just don't check those other groups out, and you don't spend enough time there to realize just how many other unique people enjoy that unique part of the hobby. So yeah, I think that there's noisy groups and quiet groups in this hobby, and I think that it's kind of a bit difficult for people who sort of sit in one tribe to even be able to count and see the people in the other tribe. So I don't know if that number's accurate, but I don't think it's super far off. Ross the Boss asks, hey Ross, how are you? Do you play Relic Knights from Tabletop Miniatures? It looks interesting, but I don't know anyone who plays it, and I would like to know more, like a summary of the world, gameplay, quality, blah, blah. I don't. I do know a fella who's done some art for them, because I think they're the same people that did Super Dungeon Explorer. And a buddy I used to work with who lives in Ottawa, does a bunch of art for that company. So yeah, I'd be interested in finding out more about it. I like some of the models. They're just cheeky, fun models. Like, I'm sure a few of them I just like to paint and even like proxy stuff in Infinity with. But yeah, I don't really have an opinion either, Ross, because it was one of those games that sort of historically had a really big Kickstarter. The Kickstarter, they wanted to do it right, so it took a long time for it to come in. And as happens when that stuff tends to stretch out, you get a lot of buzz in the beginning when it's like the idea's there, and then as it sort of like goes along and stuff doesn't get delivered, people kind of like, I'll say lose interest, but like the hype definitely dies off. And so like when it actually came out, I hadn't really heard a lot about it afterwards. People were all excited about the next thing that was on Kickstarter that wasn't available yet, which I think is hilarious. Krieger asks, are you a clone of Hitler? No, sorry, not different Krieger probably. What's your favorite beer and or style of beer? I like wheat beers a lot, but that's probably because I've spent so much time in the last 4 years in the South where it's always hot and you want like a nice beer that you can drink a lot of. You always want a nice beer that you can drink a lot of, but you want something that's kind of like refreshing and not too like, I don't like beers that are too hoppy in the summertime, you know, that sort of like tang in your mouth, that bitterness that goes better if I'm in cold weather with like with warm food. Whereas with wheat beer, I could like, man, there's this wheat beer from Indiana called Leinenkugel. I could drink that summer wheat all day, and I have. It's a great beer. But I've been really into wheat beers lately. My buddy Nick, actually, who works at Turtle Iron Brewing in Ottawa, he was an amateur brewer and he became a brewer. He made a fantastic wheat beer. I don't know what he called it, but the last time I was at his house, he made like this fantastic wheat beer. So Turtle Island might have a fantastic wheat beer here in Canada if you're Canadian and you're checking one out. But yeah, no, I really like wheat beers right now. That's like kind of my thing. Ben Howard asks, hey Ash, keep up the great work, mates. I'm thinking about heading to Canada late next year from Australia. If I did, how much gaming could we get done? Dude, as much as you want. Obviously the only like problem with us getting gaming in is I got 2 kids that got to be looked after during the week, but evenings and weeknights, I'm totally free. And obviously there's mini wargaming here locally too that you could go and get some gaming in with. So if you want to go Steve-O and the boys a shout when you're coming down, you can come see both of us and we'll all get some gaming in. That'd be awesome. Kara Song asks, what's your favorite thing about tabletop gaming? Well, Kara, I don't know. I think probably the people and the meditation. So that sounds weird because they're kind of 2 diametrically opposed things. But yeah, that's funny. The meditation is certainly my favorite thing. So being, and I say meditation, like you'll notice that like I'm talking to you guys and I'm having kind of an animated discussion while I'm doing something with my hands. It's probably because I've done this for a lot of years, but it's also because I find building and painting and working with miniatures sort of it's the definition of hobby, right? And I've said this before probably in at least half of these shows, is it's a mundane task to occupy your forebrain while your hindbrain processes and defragments all of the stress and BS and worries and stuff that you have in your life. So it's a lot like knitting or painting or drawing, doodling, sketching. It's something that you almost get into autopilot. Like if you do it a lot, you get to this point where like you're just doing it and you're not super thinking about it anymore, and it becomes a wonderfully mentally refreshing thing to have it be a habit because you're no longer fixated on it and your mind's kind of free to roam around while you're doing the thing that you're doing. You're getting this bit of work done. So I think that's where this hobby's gone to for me over time. I think when you first start off, it's not necessarily that way, but the longer you do it, the more it becomes that way. And when I say people, my least and most favorite thing about tabletop gaming is the people. And I think that's just the nature of it getting bigger. Like, it's become more socially accepted in pop culture to game and to have playing games be like a social part of your activity. Video games has certainly done a lot for that. Popular media too, like things like Big Bang Theory and just these like shows that they don't necessarily like idolize what used to be geek culture, but they make it seem normal. You know what I mean? Like you've got these guys in the show and this girl that like all get along and can communicate and cohabitate, even though they're obsessed with like, you know, Dungeons and Dragons and playing card games and playing board games and stuff. Like, and I think that that's just putting it more and more forward in like the social mind. It's become more and more normal. It's okay to play board games and like toy soldiers and Lego and all that stuff. But of course, the more people are entered into any one system, the more the outliers, like the loud, unhappy 1%, get audible, right? In a smaller group, it tends to be that because in a smaller group, there's a larger number of people happy and a smaller number of people unhappy. The larger number of people happy are actually filling up the silence with whatever's positive and is neat that's going on in their lives that they're doing and they think is fun and interesting. But as soon as sort of like the loud minority that's not happy gets involved and they start shouting, what happens is the happy majority tends to just shut up because they don't want to deal with it. So they stop commenting and they stop talking about happy stuff. And I find that's kind of especially true on the internet now, because it's the town hall for most interests, is you have these sort of like little enclaves of positivity, and they tend to be more where there's less anonymity, of course. So like I find that actually hobby groups to do with social media like Facebook tend to be a lot more positive, or at least like discourse based than negative and just instantly like reactionary, because you have this level of like, oh, you know, you're right here, I can see your picture, your name. Like Facebook requires you to use like your actual name. People still fake their names, but like there's a level of like, you know, oh, I can't just get away with saying whatever I want. Some people still do, but for the most part, the vocal majority is happy and just sharing stuff with each other and being okay. But still, where there's like a level of anonymity, like YouTube and YouTube and forums and stuff like that, there just tends to be kind of a miasma of like gloominess that I don't like very much. And so I think that like, I just kind of gravitate away from that. Like, I'm one of that like quiet majority, like where I don't, like I occasionally go to forums and stuff. I usually go to forums to share stuff I've made. But if there's just something like super negative going on, that's like a big hot topic there, and I'm reading through it, and I'm looking at it, and I have an opinion, I don't even share it. Like, I don't even pitch in, because like, there's just no point. Like, you can't have a rational discussion in most of those cases. It just gets swallowed up by all the angry butthurt, and so I don't really bother. And so that's really it. I think my favorite thing is the people, the sort of like quiet majority that's happily hobbying along and doing their thing and enjoying stuff, and especially like all the real life connection I get to have with those people. And then my least favorite thing would be the same people, different people, but people. Gekillian asks, thanks to I'm now building 3 7 to 10,000 point armies for Epic. Similarly, what media recently inspired you to revisit a game or a system? I honestly, the thing is that I don't have to revisit most of them because I have all of them. What usually kicks it off is when someone else gets inspired. Like when my buddy Jordan goes like, hey, we should finally get together and play Epic. I'm painting my space. Like I've burned out on painting all the stuff I have to paint. I'm gonna paint some Space Wolves for Epic and let's play some Epic. Like that's how that Epic game came to being. Like he was like, give me a deadline. I need something to paint to. Because I have a bunch of like 6, 7, 8,000 point Epic armies. I could just play Epic right now, but I can't because I need someone to play with. And so usually that's what happens. It's Jason saying, hey, we should, try and figure out how to play Gorka Morka again, or we should, go back and play this or play that. And it's the same with fantasy. Everyone's like, you should play more fantasy, Well, it's the same thing. Like everyone's really excited about lots of games right now, but every once in a while someone's like, hey man, we haven't played fantasy in a while. We should just like play some fantasy. And then that's how a fantasy game ends up on Throwback Thursday. So I'm not trying to drive Throwback Thursday to be about a specific game. I try and make it about a mixture of games. Like I try not to have it be just any one thing. Someone commented the other day that it was a lot of Morheim, and that's more to do with the fact that Morheim's just kind of popular in the area. Like Owen got super excited about Morheim when I taught him how to play, and then he got a lot of other local people really excited about Morheim, and so it just happened that I had a lot of people this year that were excited about Morheim. But like, who knows, next year could be the year where we all get really excited about Necromunda and we play a lot of Necromunda. Like it could just be that, or Blood Bowl, or whatever it ends up being. Like It's more to do with what other people in the area, which gives me opponents, gives me people to film with, get excited about too. So if you want to see more of a game, encourage people to come in or come in yourself. Like that's really the best way to do it. No name. Hey Ash, what's your method for pre-painting models like black primer, airbrush? It really depends on what I'm doing. You guys have seen me paint models from start to finish in lots of different ways. Like it depends on if it's gonna be dark, if it's gonna be light, if I'm gonna hand paint all details, if I'm gonna airbrush all details. Like, so for instance, with these Infinity miniatures, they're gonna have a fairly dark base coat because they're Neoterra. I think I use either Stegadon Green or Incubi Darkness. I think it's Incubi Darkness from GW Citadel's line for the base coat for these, and it's all airbrushed on. So I'll probably just base coat these with like a black prime and then just a thin coat of like black paint on primer to just get in the cracks, make sure all the recesses are dark. And then after that I'll go through and I will add in a second layer of like zenithal highlighting with the airbrush, just like a stage lighter color, usually with the same color just mixed in with like a lighter version. So I'll put in some like rust gray or something like that to that Incubi Darkness just to lighten it up a little bit. But then like all of my other world miniatures that I painted for Frostgrave were prime black and then zenithally highlighted with white primer, just like a spray can of white primer. And then that two-tone like dark to light, I could just paint colors right over top of, throw a wash on them, and then maybe a stage of highlighting and it was finished. So like, I know a lot of techniques for painting miniatures and priming and like doing my base coats and stuff, and I tend to just change it up depending upon what I'm doing. So if it's a lot of bright colors like the Frostgrave minis were, I might use Zenithal tone. If it's a lot of dark colors, like it's just horses for courses. Like it doesn't really, I don't have one way of doing it. I do it whatever way I think is gonna fit what I'm gonna paint. Sean Haynes UK, if you didn't make a living out of miniature wargaming, what would you be? Probably still a dad, making my living some other way. Like I also do consulting. I do a lot of consulting on the industry that I worked in, on tabletop stuff, just answering people's questions about that market and how it works and how hobby stores work and stuff like that. And then small business consulting too, about like personnel management and hiring and training and business development and stuff. So I have that as well as a business that I do. So I have like a small, just me, sole proprietorship business that I run on top of that. So I'm a man of many hats. I do lots of different stuff. I tend to like to, it's interesting, keeps my life interesting. So I do a lot of different things based on what my skills are. So if it wasn't this, like this just kind of happens, I'd probably be focusing on that more and just building up that relationship that I have and the contractor that I work for that contracts me out to do those things. But I don't know. If I wasn't doing something with miniatures, I'd probably be doing something in like outdoor recreation, because that's kind of my other big interest. Like I very much firmly believe in your life, if you don't do something that makes you, if you don't do something that's at least about or around what makes you happy, you're gonna be unhappy. like I know there's a lot of people that have to take a job, and I'm not averse to that. Like a job is a job. You have to get by and make do and stuff. But at the same time, I'm at a position in my life, and I'm lucky enough to just have the experience and the work history and the ability just to say like, no, I want to work in this industry, I want to work in that industry, and just kind of be able to make it happen. So, yeah, if I wasn't doing what I'm doing right now, I would probably just be focusing on consulting, and or if I was going to do anything in sales, I'd probably start an outdoor retailer, like something that sells kayaks and backpacking stuff and whatever, because you can pretty much, if you are near a university, you can open an outdoor store that's high end and make some money. And there's only one in this area that's halfway decent, and there's room for more because there's a giant university here. So I'd probably do something like that after my kids are done school, or after my kids are in school and stuff, where I have time to actually focus on those things. There'd be something about that. It'd be something probably related to the outdoors. Oliver, you always introduce your Thunder Guard as having elves, dwarves, etc., but so far I've only seen 4 ogres and Stormcast. You planning on mixing it up and having other factions in the future? I am. The big problem with anything, dude, is I have these grand plans and then other stuff comes up. Like it's not that I don't even have the minis. Like I have all the minis already. It's just that I have my fingers in so many pies that I get something like 3/4 way through my plan, and then I start something else. Like, I have 2,000 points of painted Alpha Legion now, where I didn't 3 weeks ago. and like all that Frostgrave stuff, you know what I mean? Like I get these ideas and I want to do them. I want to do them relatively quickly, and it just makes me shift gears and change over other things. So I think the thing that we kind of forget with Age of Sigmar is I started an Age of Sigmar army in when did it come out? July? Like late July, early August? It's only November, middle of November. So like I have a pretty sizable just Age of Sigmar only army for that, considering all the other projects I have on the go. So I probably will add more Age of Sigmar stuff. Like I definitely have stuff unpainted. I have a Celestant Prime and some Judicators, and of course the rest of my Ogre tribe that's unpainted, that's all round based and ready for Age of Sigmar. It's more just like I need to find time to do it, and I will. I'll get there. It's just not going to be tomorrow. You know what I mean? Crownblade asks, your Patreon page states you need $250 per video to maintain the co-op since you only signed a 6-month lease. I think, does it mean it will all come crashing down if the goal is not met in time? No, not gonna all come crashing down. It just means that I'm not gonna have, I still need to grow, right? Like the hard thing about this is I have to balance the co-op costs. I have to balance that with the costs of bringing in new material, right? So bringing in things like rule books, miniatures, like all of that has to come out of that Patreon money. And then there still has to be money that goes towards my family and stuff. So for instance, a lot of times I'll get away with going through my miniature collection and finding stuff that I can repurpose and that's ready to go. That, you know, most of the miniatures that came in my Frostgrave warband and stuff were all miniatures I already owned. Like it was all just stuff that I had lying around. But all the scenery and stuff had to come from somewhere. So it's not that the co-op is just going to come crashing down, but I have kind of a budget for every month that keeps me being able to make new content and also pays the bills and also puts money aside. And that $250 a month, like if it's like, I think it's like $8 below that right now, it will survive. You know what I mean? It's just, we're not going to make the content that I want to make as fast as I want to make it if we don't eventually get over that number. You know, like it's going to make us less nimble and less agile and less able to like, you know, continue to basically be innovative and flexible for making stuff. And it just means I have less time, right? I have less time to devote to doing this because I have to look for other avenues to make income to support my family, you know, more consulting gigs, more time away from this, and more time watching my kids. And that's really it. So it's not to do with like, the things are just gonna collapse. That's my guess. That's my best guesstimate, because the problem with even that number is I had to do a bunch of averaging on what even the people, because that's just the first video that gets posted, right? The first video that gets posted makes that number that you see on my Patreon page. Every video after that, it's a declining return because you start to hit everybody's monthly cap. So like, I think after the second video, like for the first video, it's that number. The second video, it's like $40 less for that video. So it jumps from like 240 something to like 200, you know what I mean, for that video. And then it just keeps dropping down like that. I think the last video I posted in October was worth $50, right? So it starts off at close to 250. The last video I post and a whole bunch of videos in between that are close to $50. So you have to kind of average out, if you're posting 20-ish videos a week, depending on how many days are in the month in that like cycle, how much you think you can get with the average per video of those like 20 something videos. So and I can't really know what that is because I can't see people's monthly caps. I just know how many people are posting toward the first video. And it's kind of like, even I don't know every time I post a video what the next one's gonna be worth, because everyone's monthly cap is different. But we're in a comfortable place. Like, we're not gonna collapse. We're in a place where everything's fine. It's just, you wanna be growing, you know what I mean, as a business. Because that means, growing for me doesn't necessarily mean I personally get more money, but it means that like, I'm less worried about money when it comes to paying our bills and putting food on the table. And I'm more able to look at the budget for bringing new stuff in and be like, I don't think I can do that, or I think I can do that. It's like for the 30K stuff, it was a big decision. Like, do I get that, you know, Betrayal of Calth box? Like, do I bring that in? And then now that that's done, I'm like, well, I have all kinds of infantry. I can't really play a 30K game though, because like, I'm just gonna get hosed by whatever shows up with tanks. So like, I have to look at the Forge World site and be like, oh my God, it's like $200 a tank. Like, how am I gonna do this? And so that Alpha Legion army probably, I mean, I'll add some stuff to it, but it's probably not gonna get much bigger anytime soon. Because it's like, I could buy maybe a tank every 3 months, you know, if I put aside a bunch of money for it, but it's not like instant. I'm not gonna instantly have like a Spartan Assault tank and it's like carrying all that cool stuff. I'm not a big business. I don't have subscribers, I have patrons. And the patronage basically dictates how I can grow something like that. Next up, Christian Hoffman. Hey Ash, are you a drum and bass jungle fan? What's the first race that you went to? I think he means rave, not race. I've listened to a lot of drum and bass and jungle. There was actually a jungle DJ in Toronto called Freaky Flow. It was pretty awesome. And this is in, you know, the 90s, like 20 years ago. So yeah, long time ago. I'm not as big a fan of where drum and bass and jungle music's gotten to. I really liked the old sound of jungle music where it was a lot of mashups with like hip hop of the day and stuff like that. Freaky Flow did a lot of stuff with like Canadian rappers like the Rascals and if you remember him, Cardinal Official and Choclair and all those people. And it was just a cool time to be in drum and bass and be in Toronto. But I haven't really kept up with it. Like that's young Ash. That's 20-something Ash, not 30-something Ash. Glued Fingers asks, so Jervis Johnson commented about squats over a decade ago now. You think Sisters of Battle are in the same situation? P.S. I love Widgets and Wonders. Well, I'm glad you like that. That's honestly, if I ever had to stop making battle reports, I would want to keep doing Widgets and Wonders because I think it's so important to give these people that are making something and are brave enough to like push it out there into the world a platform and a forum to like get noticed. So to not answer your question, but to answer your like comment, thank you, because that's the thing I think honestly that and all the indie games things, the spotlights you see me doing indie games are the things I'm the most proud of on this channel. So the fact that you love it, that's awesome, because that's helping that continue to happen is something that I know the patrons are really like passionate about on Patreon, and it's the thing that I'm personally like the most passionate about is helping people get noticed and be bigger and get a reward for the fact that they're brave enough to do hard work and make something, because lots of people can be critical and make comments and critique things. Not lots of people will go out there and make something and hang out a shingle. And those people deserve a voice. So Jervis Johnson commented about the squats over a decade ago. Do you think this is about the same place situation? No, I don't think so. Like, here's the thing. Games Workshop learned a lesson from getting rid of the squat line. Is no matter how ugly a baby is, you don't kill it. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how poorly it sells. You will be like literally paying for it forever. I think that what you'll see happen is old models will go away because they have to. Like when a mold gets destroyed, if you're not casting metal anymore and a mold's gone, you don't have a choice. Like it's finished. But that doesn't mean that like they're not going to just bring stuff back. Like I'm sitting here having just finished building a bunch of 30K plastic marines, which people never thought was going to happen. And as for the squat thing, I mean, I don't think they're ever going to get rid of a race again the way they got rid of the squats. Games Workshop only really discontinued one army ever, and they're still hearing about it. I think what will happen is the reality is that models go away, right? Like, they get broken, the molds wear and tear. Like, there's just a fact of life that you can't continue producing the same miniatures forever. Plastics are different. The molds are fairly indestructible, but like even stuff can happen to them where the plastic frames can't be produced anymore. So I think it doesn't mean the same miniatures will be able to be produced forever, but I don't think they're just going to blanket get rid of them. Or send out a memo being like, you now don't have an official army, officially destroy all your, like, no, I'm not going to do that. You're going to let you play with your toy soldiers. There might be a long time between the next release for them, but who knows? Maybe next time you see them, it'll be plastic. Like, it's like Half-Life 3 for miniatures, it's confirmed, here it comes, plastic whatever. But I mean, we sit in a world where we just got a plastic Horus Heresy box set, and specialist games are all coming back. So, like, who knows? Anything's possible. I think there's that whole Jedi, or the Star Wars saying that only Sith Lords deal in absolutes. There's no such thing as an absolute in business. You always reserve the right to change your mind. It's the same thing with 8th edition 40K and Age of Sigmar. Like, Games Workshop could still just bring back Warhammer. If they don't like the results of Age of Sigmar, if it doesn't sell well, nothing stops them from just bringing out a new Warhammer game in 5 years. Who knows? Like, and then it's all exciting and hot again, and people are all excited about it. Like, I think there's this weird like finality that people seem to think every decision has attached to it, and that's just not how business works. Everybody reserves the right to change their mind and go back and just have a do-over, and that could just happen. So we'll see. Christian asks, are you planning to play some Legends of the Old West games on your channel? Oh, I hope so. I was just talking about Legends of the Old West. Who was I talking about it with? Mike Fuendling, who plays in a lot of my fantasy and Age of Sigmar and Morheim battle reports. He was talking about, he bought a bunch of pirate miniatures to play Morheim with, and I was like, we should play Legends of the High Seas. And he's like, there's a Legends of the High Seas? And I'm like, yeah, Games Workshop made a pirate game. And he's like, Games Workshop made a pirate game? It's funny, I think so few people know about that. Because it wasn't around for very long, but it was a fantastic game. So was, of course, Legends of the Old West. And the reason I've been thinking about it recently is because I've been playing all this Lord of the Rings, and it's all based on the Lord of the Rings combat system, and it's such a great game. Oh man, and I would love to like just bust out all my Black Scorpion and like Perry historical like Old West minis and paint them all. And yeah, that'd be amazing. I hope someone give me a reason to. Someone out there in TV land be like, I'm gonna come play Legends of the Old West with you. You should go break out all your miniatures and we'll build gangs and we'll play, because that would be awesome. Because I can use I have all the terrain for Malifaux. It'd be perfect for it. I have all the Old West terrain, so it's basically, we just need to paint minis and play. Anthony asks, given the mixed reviews of Age of Sigmar, what one rule would you change to give it a more mass appeal? Well, there's an assumption in your question that it doesn't currently have mass appeal. And the assumption that you're making is that it's not selling well. And I think that might be wrong. I think it's selling to different people. Now, I don't know, because nobody knows. I mean, you'll find out next year sometime in the GW annual report how well it did, probably, just based on, you know, its lump in the overall mix of things and whatever the chairman remarks on it. But I think it has plenty of mass appeal. I think it has more mass appeal than Fantasy does, because the blood price is lower, because you're not having to paint 200-something miniatures to play a game. You know, you can paint 16, 20 miniatures and play a game if you want. It's just as legitimate a game as playing an old 2,000 to 3,000 point game of Fantasy. So, yeah, I think there's I'm going to struggle with that question a little bit, because if the question's about mass appeal, I think the current one, this edition probably has, because it's a lower entry point, like the bar's lower to get in and play, I think it probably has more mass appeal probably than the rank and file one did. I think that the difference is it doesn't necessarily appeal to the pre-existing Warhammer Fantasy market as much as it appeals to maybe people that didn't already play Warhammer Fantasy. And that's the only real answer I can give you, because I'm struggling with that question. Guymar asks, hey Ash, thoughts on treating War Machines with crew as a single unit in Age of Sigmar? I'm still confused by that one. I don't think that there's been like an official thing, but because they have two separate stat lines, there's not a lot of mixed model units in Age of Sigmar. Most things in a unit have the same ish stat line. Like, they sometimes do different attacks, but they have the same, the little circle on the side that's like move, wounds, save, bravery is the same for the whole thing. Whereas with a War Machine, you have two of those now. You have the War Machines one, you have the Crews one. And those are usually, I don't know if it's one unit or if it's two units. And so, and it changes even sometimes by war scroll. So I think I don't think there's any problem with doing either way. I don't think it really matters. I think it's actually slightly better for the War Machine if the War Machine itself can always be the model that you hit, because the War Machine itself is usually tougher. So it's actually slightly better for War Machines if they are a unit, because the War Machine can always be like, no, I get hit, not the crew, because the crew is usually pretty squishy. But on the flip side of that, if they weren't, it means that crew from other War Machines that get destroyed can walk over and crew a War Machine whose crew is destroyed, which also is kind of a benefit. So I'm kind of like 6 of one, half dozen the other. I don't really care which way it goes. I just wish that I knew. I don't really know. And it hasn't seemed to have been clarified. Modern Witch asks, oh my God, did you see the Shadowrun Gang War stuff coming out? That's it. That's my entire question. No, I haven't. Although someone, I think, told me I should go look at it. And Shadowrun, if you guys don't know what it is an RPG. If you mixed Morheim and like wizards and trolls and magic and elves and stuff with Infinity, that would be Shadowrun. So it's magic occult fantasy in slick cyberpunk future. Shadowrun. And it's pretty cool. It was originally in the 80s and 90s as an RPG setting. There's been a couple video games based on it, like some first-person shooters and stuff, but if they did like a slick like gang style game of it, I would definitely check it out, because that would have the old school nostalgia train appeal that you guys all know that I love, to get me to paint stuff and draw something else. Ty asks, what's an IP that you want to see made into a miniatures game? For me, it's definitely Game of Thrones. I think Dark Sword makes a whole line of Game of Thrones miniatures. If you want to check them out, they're pretty nice. And yeah, I think Game of Thrones would be cool. I don't know how you would do Game of Thrones, though. I wouldn't want to do mass combat in Game of Thrones. I would want to do something more akin to like a warband adventuring style game. But then you'd need a setting for it. And Game of Thrones tends to be it's a story of nations, right? So it's a story that's like all over the place, as opposed to being set in like one sort of like fundamental adventure pit like Frostgrave or Morheim have this like great backdrop that everyone's fighting in. So if you did it, I think what you'd have to do is you'd have to do it as like a certain setting. Like you could do a Game of Thrones game, I think, that's just set in the wall. You know what I mean? And you're playing as wildlings, you're playing as the Night's Watch, you're playing as like a local baron, you're playing as free people. You know what I mean? Like it's whatever you're. And I know free people and wildlings are technically the same, but they're also not. Free people could just be anyone who doesn't, raid or whatever. The Thanes, like you'd be anybody, and that would be a good setting. You'd be White Walkers and the undead. Like I think that would be a good place to set a Game of Thrones game, because the backdrop's there for different factions to all be fighting each other or whatever. You could even be Ironborn, because I think they can sail around the coast of the wall and do stuff. Like, it would give you the excuse to have a whole bunch of people fighting in different places. But yeah, you'd have to be careful how you did that. Now, for me personally, I'm trying to think of like what I would want to see as an IP. Now, Fallout's obviously one of them, but like I have this as on a test. I have all these great indie games that I can play that with. I just played Halo Fleet Battles, which I really enjoyed with Owen, which you guys will see soon. I'm trying to think, like, what is an IP I'd really enjoy? There's not a lot of IPs that I like that I haven't already been, that either started as miniature games or haven't already been a miniature game. Aliens has already been done. Mad Max has already been done. Terminator's already been done. Predator's already been done. Like, I'm trying to think of what you could even set it in that would be interesting. I'm actually looking at my wall of books right now to try and figure out what I could do. It's all kind of been done. Like, there's very little that hasn't been played out. Yeah, that's a tough one, man. Come back to me. Ask me that one again. I'll think about it some more. Nat asks, what's your favorite Malifaux master? Right now, Von Schill, obviously, because he's basically Hulk Hogan. I think that's awesome. I want to try Old Witch because I can't wrap my head around what she does yet. I also want to try a bunch of the Ten Thunder stuff, but like I want to use my existing Ten Thunder stuff because I have Mizaki, I want to paint her up, but then I want to use her with like all of Lynch's Ten Thunder's like monster men, like the Illuminated and stuff, and see how that goes. But probably my favorite one right now is going to be Mr. Man himself. He's just fun to play with. Like he's so brawly and he's like tongue-in-cheek and funny, and he's so sort of like flexible and versatile as a master. He's a lot of fun. And then I like Jacob. Like I just love playing with Jacob Lynch because he's just a dirty cheater. And in Malifaux, it's all about cheating. So having all those like card up your sleeve tricks, it just feels right. It's a fun master to play. Dennis Bamber asks, hey Ash, I saw Flames of War bag in your videos. Do I have an army and do I play the game? If so, will you record a video? I'm actually getting ready to do a bunch of Flames of War stuff with Chris from Lords of War Games because he is super hot about this new Cold War game that they're doing. So he and I are planning to do a little series on that. He's going to get me one of the two like single player starters, and I'll paint one up and I'll play it. That Flames of War bag has a mid-war German army in it. I also have an unpainted US paratrooper army and British cruiser tank army. They're all mid-war because that's when I played. I didn't play late war. I'll be honest, late war didn't attract me at all because late war Flames of War, like, yeah, you get all the cool like high-tech toys and you get like companies of Panther tanks and stuff, but it's like Apocalypse in 40k. It's just too much. Like I like things being in the balanced. I'd rather play with scrubs than with like the super ultra mega killy death machines. I don't feel anything. The wins don't mean anything when I play that way. It doesn't do it for me. Like it's the same reason why I'm not a huge fan of playing Apocalypse games. It's just too much. Like I enjoy a small sort of like tight race to the finish narrative game more than I enjoy a huge messy explosions everywhere, wham boom, you know, like giant formation, War Machines and Lords of War thing. To play that scale game, I'll play Epic. I prefer, and that's actually why I like Flames of War. Is in World War II games, I love playing them in 15 mil because then you can use your toys without it feeling like they're huge, overwhelming. You're playing like a mass giant battle, and so I think that's 15 mil is a good scale for that. Same reason why I like Heavy Gear, same reason why I like Epic, same reason why I like Gothic, is you get the feeling of a mass battle, but it plays smoothly. It feels more like a skirmish of lots of stuff. So yeah, short story long, I will be playing some Flames of War on the channel. Hey Ash, I remember you mentioned use a modified version of Morheim rules in a video. What do you change exactly? I don't actually. What I have is I have a list of recommendations of things you change if you want to make the game a little less one-dimensional. Because as the rules stand in the book, there is like a best way to play most of the bans and best things to take and things that you just don't take because they're not necessarily worth it. And they're worth it not for balance reasons, but if you read anything that Thomas has ever written about writing Mordheim, it's all for narrative reasons. Like suits of armor in Mordheim are supposed to feel prestigious. Like you're a Richie Rich if you have a suit of armor. And so that's why it's costed at a premium basically to buy armor. But at the same time, by doing that, by making armor less prevalent, you automatically make things that are counter armor less valuable. So a club is 3 crowns, a sword is 5 crowns, or not sword, axe is 5 crowns. The axe is -1 armor save. The club improves your stuns. There's never a reason to take an axe. It costs more, and you'll almost never need it because no one wears any armor. Whereas the club will always be better because it's always going to stun people. So the cheaper option, which is infinitely better in the game because of a lack of the thing the other thing does, it just pushes the game in a direction. And so what I do with changes like that typically, it's the same with like slings, making slings. If they double tap, they're always at short range, and you can't move and fire and do it. Spears, although most spears get modified to be only usable in one hand, because in the original version of Morheim you just have a spear in each hand, just be like stab people, which is kind of neat. It's kind of like that the war boy from he had the exploding spears from Mad Max, and he jumps off the thing with like the 2 spears in his hand with the grenades in the end, which was cool. But it, you know, when you have an entire warband of like 20 Skaven all with 2 spears, it becomes less cool and less fun to play against. And just reducing the cost of armor. Light armor costing 10 crowns, heavy armor costing 25 crowns, ground armor costs 50. Then you can have armor all over the place, and it just balances at the cost for everything else. And then having main hand, offhand weapons is the other usual amendment that I make to the rules, where you have weapons that can be used as your primary hand. So swords, axes, maces, daggers, they can all be main hand weapons. What else can be main hand weapons? Spears can be main hand weapons. I can't think of anything else. And then you have a list of weapons that can be used in the offhand, and that's things like shields, bucklers, daggers, again, maces, axes, swords, because you can have 2 of them. But if they don't have the offhand rule, you can't use them in each hand. So spears don't have the offhand rule. What else doesn't have the offhand rule? Morning stars don't have the offhand. Like anything that you could use double-handed weapons don't have the offhand rule. So basically, it's a way of saying something's two-handed, but instead of it's saying what is and isn't two-handed, you just make a list of things that can be used in the offhand. And it just kind of cleans up what guys can be armed with and how to not game the system. So just stuff like that. But again, this is just my personal house rules for running campaigns. It's not anything I play with. I play with the rules out of the book in the co-op because everybody has access to them. So that's all. Carthagen asks, I love the new standalone GW Assassin Arm Execution Force. Do you see more standalone games coming from GW? Well, if you just got the 411 from Australian GW, and then of course from the GW app now too, yeah, we will, because they're forming a special studio, which will also sell all the Lord of the Rings and Forge stuff. So I think we're going to get lots of that stuff. I think that's exactly how you can handle keeping those games coming out. So yeah, short story long, I see more of those games in the future. Your Name Here asks, hey Ash, what would you say your top 5 favorite mechanics in war games are? So top 5 favorite mechanics in war games. I like opposed testing. So when I say opposed testing, I mean that I don't have a fixed defensive stat or reactive stat, and you don't just have a fixed attack stat. So if I was going to give you a fixed opposed system, fighting in Magic the Gathering, right? You have damage and you have your hit points. So it's a number slash a number. And when 2 monsters fight each other, they just run into each other. They both apply damage to each other. And if one isn't more than the other, then you live. And if the other one is more than the other, then you die. And they just remove each other, a 1-for-1. I like opposed testing, where you usually both have a stat, but then there's the random variable of like the Fog of War, effect, where we both have a dice roll or whatever the random number generator mechanic is that kicks in, and it determines, basically adding with our stats and bonuses and maneuvering or whatever, who actually wins that fight. So I like opposed testing systems, especially if they have enough dynamics in how they are modified. So if they're modified through maneuvering especially, I really like that, because it makes it feel like you're doing something during the reactive part of the turn. It's a big part of what I like in Infinity. Other mechanics, top 5 favorite mechanics. I like any game that allows you to create your force to a degree where you can make it match your model collection, the models you like. What I don't like in a game is a game that restricts you to having X number of models armed exactly X number away with like no variation whatsoever. I don't like games that are too restrictive. Now, I don't like all the freedom in the world. Like, I want there to be a system I have to work inside of, because that's part of the puzzle of wargaming. I think that's part of when Age of Sigmar came out, what some people's primary sort of like gut reaction was to the fact that they would never get to tinker again. Like, they could tinker a little bit, but there was no system to tinker inside. There would never be a way to, without points, there was no way to determine what the most optimal best thing was that you could take. What was the greatest list you could do? And for a lot of people, that was their hobby. So I like there to be some challenge. Like, there has to be something you have to maneuver around inside of to try and figure out what the best thing is. Now, I'm not obsessed with it, mind you, but I want to be able to tinker, but with limitations, so that I can have a puzzle to try and kick around in my head and figure out. That's 2. I like dynamic movement. I hate games where I move from like square to square. They feel like board games. It was actually my number one complaint with Dead Zone, was it didn't have a lot of dynamic movement, and you moved kind of in like, you moved from area to area with your models, and there wasn't a lot of like precise model movement. I like precise model movement. I like feeling, to me that's cinematic. I like it when guys have to jump over barrels or climb walls or hide behind a corner or a door. That's one of my favorite things about the newer edition of Infinity, is it doesn't restrict your movement as much with having you make a test every time you try and do something. So it feels like there's guys parkouring through these city streets and over these buildings and walls and stuff. And you get more of a, it's more cinematic. The movie playing in my head is a little bit more real because of it. And I really enjoy that. So dynamic movement's important. And then I like there to be some geometry to the game. This will be number 4. Yeah, number 4. When I say geometry, I mean that facing and alignment and maneuvering become important. So it's one of the things that I like the best about Battlefleet Gothic, is that not just your arc and facing determines what you can shoot, like where dice come out of your ship is based on the facing of the ship, but also the facing of the opponent's ship dictates how well you're going to be able to shoot it. So the geometry in Battlefleet Gothic is great because you're trying to maneuver your ship at the same time as you're trying to catch out the enemy ships to maximize your firepower and your ability to inflict damage. And there's something balletic about that. There's something graceful to playing a maneuvering game that I really, really enjoy. So I hope that there's more games that come out like that, because they're a thing that sort of like, that wraps me up in a game and makes me feel like I'm there, if that makes sense. I think I have time for one more question and then we're gonna be done. Charles Cover asks, you play a lot of different games. For someone who only has 40k Age of Sigmar armies, what game would you recommend trying next? More than willing to buy new models. Okay, so that's a great question. You play 40k Age of Sigmar, so you play mass combat games, and you like those games. Now, here's the thing, is what are you interested in? Like, that doesn't tell me enough really to recommend a game to you. What I can recommend though, is that you try something that isn't a mass combat dice chucking game. Try something with a story, or where your warband or army might have a story, like that they get better and some kind of tale gets told. So you can play a lot of pickup games of 40k in Age of Sigmar, but they don't necessarily link from game to game. Age of Sigmar actually has a built-in round-by-round battle mechanic, which I think is kind of cool, but 40k doesn't for the most part. And so that would be my recommendation, is try something like that. If you want to use your existing models, you could easily start playing Morheim tomorrow. All the rules are free. You can just go to Yak Tribe Gaming and go into their little vault and find like every published Morheim rule from back in the day. And your miniatures you already have can pretty much make any Morheim. Like, you can, if you own Age of Sigmar miniatures, probably you already have a Morheim warband. You just have to pick which one you want to play and give it a go. So yeah, something like that. Something where your games matter from game to game, and you can play linked games and have a little like sort of legend grow out of the models that you own, and their sort of like progression through time. They can live, they can die, they can have stories. Because I find that when you go from wargaming to that, you start to get more engaged in your modeling. You tend to start looking at miniatures from more than just what they do in game, but like just because you like them and you want to have them do X or do Y, or you just want to have X or Y type miniature in your army. And that can be really rewarding. So if you haven't done it before, give that a go. All right, so that's it for me. I have managed to clean all these minis. I'm gonna put them together and get some paint on them. at least a base coat hopefully today, and some airbrushing, and get them done this week. So thanks again for watching. If you want to get a comment in or a question in, please click the link below, go to SurveyMonkey, you can ask me a question for December. Now I'm going to be off the last week in November, so I probably won't get there will be some time in between this one and next one, because I'm going to be in the Dominican Republic for a wedding for the last week of the month, and that means that I'm not getting back, and I won't have the next piece of Ash filmed until probably late the first week of December. So yeah, sorry this one was late. I've been crazy busy, obviously, as you can see, with all the projects I've had on the go and doing the Horus Heresy stuff, and just trying to crank out all this new stuff. I'm a sort of a habitual bite off more than I can chew guy, because I know I can do it all, but sometimes I can't even admit to myself that I have time limitations, and I just want to do everything. So I will continue towards the end of the year to hopefully crank out more stuff, and then you'll see my hobby resolutions for 2016. We'll see how I got done. I have to actually add all this Alpha Legion stuff to my hobby resolution. I think I'm close to 350 miniatures painted now for the year. Yeah, it's a lot of models. Gosh, it's a lot of models. If you guys saw my picture on my Facebook page, I cracked my paint palette in half the other day because I had almost like 1/4 of an inch of paint on the palette. It's an old GW palette, and I just split off this huge like wad of paint and cleaned it off and started painting fresh again. That's like the last 6 months painting on that palette. If you're not part of it though, go to just search Guerrilla Miniature Games 2015 hobby resolutions. You can see the progress for all the people that took part. There's like 120 people in there now, all tracking how they did for the year, and we're getting ready to wrap it up because obviously there's only like a month and a half left. But yeah, lots of time to crank out a few more projects and get your number pretty high for your versus, your painted versus bought number, and also for just your total painted for the year. I can't believe I've painted probably a miniature a day this year. That's madness. Anyway. So yeah, we'll see you for the next piece of Ash. Again, get as quick as you can to get me an answer, or sorry, question, I'll get you an answer. I got through about 2/3 of the questions this time, so, and it went really long, so hopefully I'll be able to get through all of them next time. So we'll see you for this again in December. Until then, I'm Ash.